In a telephone survey, the majority of the persons asked prefer Russia to withdraw from Ukraine even without victory, while the Russian armed forces inflict setbacks on the Ukrainians at the same time. Hello and welcome to this situation report. We start at the northern part of the front line here. Around Sinkivka, the fighting is continuing at a high pace. The Russians had recently entered the outskirts, the outermost part of Sinkivka, and they keep pushing towards the town. At the same time, attacks are coming from Liman Pershi, and they probably gained some ground here. At least I have some indication from Ukrainian sources pointing in this direction. Fighting is also continuing here in the direction of Travneve. I'm sorry, a little difficult for me. Fighting is also around Avdiivka is happening and Novoselivske, and we have another fresh Russian success down here at Terny. At this area, the Russians advanced roughly 2 kilometers to the west, more or less from this line up to this over the last 48 hours. So a significant success in this regard. Also, fighting is happening towards Torsken. No success for the Russians here and in the Serebryanske forest, close to Dibrova. According to Ukrainian military bloggers, the Ukrainians lost 5 positions close to Dibrova. This is likely true, as it's coming from the Ukrainians admitting defeat, even though I cannot say where exactly those positions were that they lost. South of the Seversky Donetsk, fighting is continuing, heavy fighting is continuing, both north and south of Bakhmut. We have a Russian success west of Berchivka. The Russians managed to advance probably 300 meters in the direction of Bodanivka. According to the Russians, the Ukrainians abandoned several positions. Ukrainians claim that with counterattacks, they retook some positions in Khomove. I do not see any proof of this whatsoever, though, so it's probably, or it's possibly not true. I cannot confirm any change of territory here north or northwest of Bakhmut. At the south, the fighting is also continuing. I cannot confirm any change in territory here either. Let's switch over to Avdiivka. Fighting is continuing there as well. The Russians have entered Stepove. We have a geolocalized position here. As you can see, they are well within the first houses of Stepove. They've also been seen in this tree line and in the southern here. That is visible here. They have advanced here, and in later videos, in later pictures, supposedly it shows them even further advancing into the town. Stepove is probably now more or less half of it is lost to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians still hold on to the western part, but as of now, the Russians definitely managed to enter the town. They also tried to attack further into the coke plant here, but it was not successful. I cannot confirm any success in this regard. There are claims and indications that the Russians might have had additional success here in the industrial area and in the dacha areas. I cannot confirm anything here either. Fighting is happening at Opitne, Siverne, and Pervomaiske as well. Russian claims are that they managed to advance somewhat in the direction of Pervomaiske. No visual evidence is existent, though, and no proof, no admission by the Ukrainians that they've lost positions. Marinka, on the other hand, is not looking great. The Russians, a Russian drone spotted a Russian flag flying on a house here. I think it was on this street, if I'm not mistaken. The Russians have likely advanced to this point as of now. According to some Russian mill bloggers and some pro-Russian outlets, Marinka has fallen. This is definitely not true, because Marinka is also the northern part here, and here we can confirm that the Ukrainians still have positions in these areas. In the southern part, it's not perfectly clear. I found some Russian military bloggers saying that the Ukrainians still have presence in it, but no positions, meaning they walk around in there, but they don't have permanent positions anymore. Others say that they are still in the northwestern part of the southern part of Marinka. But regardless, what we can confirm now that the Russians had significant success in the south of the town, and at the same time that it has not fallen despite some claims from pro-Russian news outlets or from some that went a little ahead with their assessment of the situation. Still, though, the situation is definitely developing badly for the Ukrainians. With the loss of Marinka, Pobjeda will be more difficult to hold, and once they manage to expand here, the whole southern part is increasingly getting threatened, and this is significant because should the Russians manage to push the Ukrainians back, let's say, to a line more or less like this, then they will probably be able to use that railroad line again. Right now, it's fully in mortar range, so it's no point in trying to re-establish the railroad link here, even though the dam is still in existence. But as soon as they've pushed them far enough away that only long-range precision weapons can hit them, it makes sense to start building up the railroad to use it for resupply again. And then the whole Russian supply situation in the southern area will develop for the better. So this is a very dangerous position for the Ukrainians now. Should they lose that southern flank from Vuhledar to Marinka, their situation in the whole southern area will worsen after that, as the Russians will have more supplies to use after that. Further west, we have not much change in positions in fighting. Fighting is also continuing at Velika Novosilka. Here we have a fresh geolocalization west of Staromayorske. When we see the situation here, it's like 1, 2, 3 lines. And according to this here, it's 1, 2, 3 lines. So they have advanced somewhat east on that tree line here towards Staromayorske. No breakthrough, but they are inching forward to Staromayorske. This here is a ridge line. Should the Ukrainians lose it, they will have no choice but to abandon Staromayorske and retreat back north, as it can overlook the towns in the valley here. Further west at Orikhiv, we have a fresh loss of a Leopard 2. The Ukrainians lost it west of Robotine. I think they must have lost it in here. It was initially hit by a Russian drone. After that, the crew abandoned it in a territory held by the Ukrainians, but the Russians wanted to make sure it can't be recovered and repaired, as happened a couple of times before, and they hit the Leopard 2 with at least 2 ATGMs afterwards. While the damage is unknown, it seems unlikely that a tank hit by several ATGMs can be used for more than maybe donating some spare parts. At least that's the expectation, that this is now a completely lost Leopard 2 in this area. The Russians also attack at Robotine and Verbove from both sides. They try to push in. We have some claims, as usual, that the Russians had some success, especially at Verbove. They claim to have been successful. I do not see any proof of it, as usually that means it might be true, but it's nowhere close for me to be able to confirm it. The Ukrainians attacked as well from Robotine to the west mostly, and in the direction of Verbove. I cannot confirm any successes here either. So for me, the front line more or less remained the way it was the last time. Let's switch over to the Dnipro there, where we have developments as well. The Russians keep pounding Dnipro from the air. We have, for instance, here a video of a Russian glide bomb of hitting into the area. At least that's how it was described, even though the explosions look, I'm not completely sure whether that's actually in the size of aerial bombs, but we can see how the area looks, and we can see how destroyed the buildings are. That looks, to be honest, that looks a little more like artillery shells to me, but regardless. And here we have a video that is supposedly older, even though it's now being spread as new one, but it seems to be some weeks at least old, where we can see the overall situation here. We see damage already on several of the houses, and this here is the conker. This is the wooded part that is moving into Krinky itself. So you have, but it shows us a nice overview how the situation is. This is the area held by the Ukrainians for a while, where supposedly they have electronic warfare systems in it. They have drone operators in it. And this is the whole of Krinky, which is spread around the Dnipro, going along here. We see the damages being done to the area already at that point, and this is where the Ukrainians bring in their troops, and we see this is the forested areas where the Ukrainians try to push forward for quite some time now. I have some claims that they have advanced, but there's nothing I can confirm. So as of now, we cannot confirm any change. I do not have serious claims of this, by the way, probably a Russian position that was established initially to defend the Dnipro. At this time, I cannot confirm any change in territory. I have no claims that the Russians advanced to some degree, so there's a small possibility that the Ukrainians might have gained single positions here in the forested area, but it's fairly unlikely overall. This, by the way, was the advanced piece of wood that I showed you here. Overall, from the situation there, we have some claims by the Ukrainian General Staff, obviously active war participants, so we need to be somewhat, take it with a grain of salt, but they claim, the Ukrainians claim soldiers are refusing to attack. Russian soldiers are refusing to attack because of a lack of tactical coordination and a lack of artillery support. The minefields of the Russian are being classified as top secret, so not all units even know where minefields are. And the claims are that within the last month, the 810th Marine Infantry Brigade of the Russians suffered 50 casualties around Krinky just because of their own minefields, because they didn't know where they were. Also, several of the units are coming out of heavy fighting. So we had it in the past that War Gonzo said that a lot of the units were brought in from different areas. He himself called it a very heterogenic units that but still expected serious attempts to push in the bridgehead that the Ukrainians have set up. But we see that a lot of those units come right out of intense fighting, either at Zaporizhzhia or further east. So the overall cohesion should be somewhat limited, which might explain why just probably 300 Ukrainians are still able to hold the town of Krinky or the parts of Krinky they have occupied as of now. Overall, the situation seems to be more or less stable. The Russians are incapable of pushing it in. They are increasingly bringing in more and more artillery, more and more usage of glide bombs, but the Ukrainians are able to hold out. But at the same time, as of now, they are not able to advance further either. The Ukrainian President Zelensky had a meeting with the Supreme Commander General Salushny, and they agreed to establish fortifications along all front lines. The one area they didn't mention particularly was Zaporizhzhia, so probably they expect to go further here. This would be a sign that Ukraine is expecting to stay in the defensive along vast parts of the front line for a fairly fair amount of time. In yesterday's video about the question whether or not the Ukrainians have a run out of men, I mentioned already that Ukraine tries to keep up the resemblance of normal business as usual, both at running the universities as well as in regards to building up previously destroyed areas. Here we see, for instance, that it might be up for discussion whether neglecting the rebuilding of houses around Kiev would have been a smarter choice than putting the effort, the concrete, the building material rather in fortifications along the east, where the Russians are keep pushing and where better fortifications, concrete bunkers might have saved lives and might have saved positions. At least as of now, it seems like the Ukrainians want to set up fortifications along the whole eastern line. Obviously, the fact that the Surovikin line has held the Ukrainians back more or less wherever, at any position, like this is the furthest advance and they barely scratched into the fortification lines. This is a clear sign that as of now, with the dominance of artillery that is guided by small drones, fortifications play a huge role and Ukraine will act accordingly in this regard. In partisan activity, we have partisan or sabotage. We have 2 blown up trains. A freight train, a Russian freight train, has blown up in the Severomysky, something like this, tunnel. I think it's in Buryatia, so fairly east far east of the Urals. It has caught fire on the 29th of November. Two freight wagons filled with diesel were exploding and they set 4 more on fire. According to the reports, there were explosives on board, probably planted by the SBU, that has blown it up. The interesting part is it happened inside of a tunnel where obviously the fire might cause some structural damage. The important thing is this is one of the two main connections between China and Russia, where resupply coming from North Korea supposedly is running through as well. So this, and at least according to latest report, the tunnel is still blocked as of now. So this might have some effect further west, far thousands of kilometers west at the front line, that a train has blown up here. And then a day later, on the bridge of the Baikar-Amur railway, there was a second explosion, another train loaded with fuel. And again, the likely reason for that was that, again, the SBU blew it up. There are some claims that it was coordinated with the other one to block the alternative route. As of now, it's unclear to which degree the bridge was damaged. Supposedly, there are some pictures running around that the fire wasn't that big and several of the wagons were just venting the diesel, but the diesel itself didn't cause fire, so it's unclear to which degree it will have been damaged. In troop generation terms, we have a new law that is in reading in the Duma, which would put volunteers under military law as well. So far, a lot of things that are a crime among regular Russian soldiers have not been a crime among volunteers. But once that law is being applied, desertion, refusal of orders, evasion of duty, attacks on superiors, going AWOL or unauthorized leaving of a place of service, playing sick, or deliberate or accidental destruction of military equipment will then be punishable. So far, apparently, it hasn't been punishable. And from Kazakhstan, we have news that a man has been sentenced to over 6 years in prison. He fought with Wagner at Bakhmut, and there are some things, some estimations, some guesses that this might cause problems with Russia, as it's after Uzbekistan the second country that has sentenced someone, a citizen, for fighting for Russia in regards to fighting as a mercenary, as Russia tries to recruit as many of the Central Asians as possible into its armed forces to keep the burden of recruitment away from their own citizens. The Novaya Gazeta is reporting, it's an opposition newspaper, that the central bank is offering commutation, I think is the word, for debt if you sign up for military service. So this is, if somebody is highly in debt, they give the incentive of going to the military to avoid paying the debt and defaulting. And we have news from the Ukrainian side as well, which is fairly unpleasant to the Ukrainians. By the way, here we have images of the second railway that has burning. As you can see, there is quite some fire, even though bridge isn't really visible here. We have here a news that according to a Shahid drone that they took, it had a SIM card on board, and the SIM card was actually from the Ukrainian service Kyivstar. So a Shahid coming from Russian occupied territory or from Russia striking Ukraine had a Ukrainian SIM card on board. The thing is, it's not clear whether it was used to control it, to maybe give it new targeting data, or whether it might even have used it to understand its position by using the Ukrainian cell phone service to triangulate where it is right now. As said, kind of surprising to find Ukrainian SIM cards in this. At the same time, we heard that Ukraine, I think it was in the last situation report, that the Russians put a huge effort in electronic warfare, and that Ukrainian side has especially set up one system against the Shahid drones to scramble their GLONASS navigation system. This here might be an example of how the Russians react to that. Also, the Russians have put into service, or are in process of putting into service, a new drone. That drone is the Hortensia 10, and it's a new FPV drone. It's, according to the Russians, it has a payload of 5 kilograms, so a fair amount regarding to previous ones, and thus it can carry a bigger warhead. According to the report, it has thermal vision, in an FPV drone. It can drop its payload as well. It doesn't have to fly into it. And it has a flight endurance of 6.5 minutes when it's carrying those 5 kilograms and a range of 6 to 9 kilometers. And according at least to this report, again, it's from TASS in Russia, so it might not all be true what's being said here, but according to them, the first 500 will already arrive at the Northern Military District. So according to this, they are already being delivered to the troops in this context. And then we have a new report from Medvedev, who claimed how many soldiers Russia has recruited. And he now said that from the 1st of January to the 1st of December, Russia has recruited 452,000 soldiers. On the 9th of November, it was 410. So according to him, they would have recruited within 3 weeks 42,000. That seems pretty big, and we should take these numbers as an absolute maximum of what Russia has recruited. I said it in the past, if we see the increase of size of the Russian armed forces while accounting for the losses, I don't think his numbers are that crazy far off. So I don't think it's 120 and he claims it's 452, but obviously this will probably not be the accurate data down to the single number, because usually you would round that up a little to make it sound more impressive. Still though, according to him, 450,000 recruited. As we can see the increase of size of the Russian military, and we see more on the front line. We see reserves appearing where supposedly they didn't have any left. They must have sufficient supply of personnel, which despite their high losses, which are well documented, so the numbers don't seem to be that crazy far off at the same time. Putin now has also signed a decree that would increase the size of the Russian armed forces to 2.209 million, so 209,000, 2,209,000, up from 2,039,000. But the important thing is it doesn't mean their armed forces are actually 2.2 million strong. If they reach that size, it includes the civilian staff, which is almost 1 million personnel. So the actual soldiers will be, if the Russian armed forces reach that size or have already reached that size because of their recruitment campaign, it would mean that 1.32 million Russian soldiers are serving in the armed forces, 170,000 more than with the previous setup. And finally, we have political news as well. There was a telephone survey from Chronicles, and according to them, they asked the Russians how they think about the war. And the full support of the war, meaning no retreat and without achieving the war goals, more spending for military, basically those who want to win even if it costs them. This support has shrunk from 22% to 12% between February and October, so a significant decrease. At the same time, 40% support a retreat from Ukraine without achieving the war aims, so without winning. And 33% still support the continuation of the war overall. And this has dropped from 47 to 33% in the same time. So the Russian support in the public for the continuation of the war is dropping, not significantly enough to obviously stop the Russian population, the Russian government, but at the same time, the support is going down. And we recently had the survey from the Levada Institute, which is considered to be independent as well. And there, the majority of the persons asked also favored peace negotiations. So when it comes to support for the Russian military operation, for the Russian war, the home front is not unanimously behind it. That's why we don't see radical mobilization acts within the industry and not additional waves of mobilization from personnel, even though it probably might make sense from a purely military point of view. And then we have something weird from Chechnya. Adam Kadyrov is being put into leadership position among the Sheikh Mansour battalion that was recently formed. He's there to surveil it. The interesting part is, though, that Adam Kadyrov is 15 years old. He's a young teenager, far away from being an adult, but he already has seven decorations, among them the Hero of Chechnya. So I guess he must be some very special boy and some very capable boy. The obvious guess is that Ramzan Kadyrov is preparing Adam to be his successor in the leader for Chechnya as well. And the Ukrainian government is saying that 100,000 migrant workers from Central Asia have arrived in the occupied Ukrainian territories, most likely for construction work there. So 100,000 migrants are now in this area here, according to the Ukrainians. When it comes to international support, we have news as well. Israel's Elbit Systems and Romania's CN Romarm SA have signed a contract for the joint production of 155mm grenades. That's the large NATO caliber. And the factory in Moreni is going to produce it. Right now, it doesn't produce ammunition of this kind, so it's likely that they will set up a new production facility, because as of now, they only build armed vehicles. And there was also a small aid package from Germany, some trucks, some cars, 15 sniper rifles, some laser designators, things like that, like smaller items that are also needed, but nothing so special in the context of it. Still, that's already it from me for now for this situation report. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. What do you think about the current developments and about Adam Kadyrov? And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting this channel. And that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.